Hi everyone. So we were dealing with the previous year questions that were asked from literary theory. So we will be taking the questions that were asked from December 2018 to December 2020 examination in this video. And here in this video, we will be dealing with the literary theory called New Historicism. So far we have discussed about different theories, and now we will be dealing with literary theory called New Historicism. So before moving to the questions, let's have a little bit idea about what New Historicism is. So speaking about New Historicism, we know that New Historicism, it actually goes for the textuality of history and the historicity of a text. That is, when we speak about New Historicism, we can say that it's actually a critical approach. More than a theory, it's actually a critical approach to literary and cultural analysis that emerged in the late 20th century. And about New Historicism, it emphasizes the interrelationship between three things in common. That is literature, history and culture or context in which this particular text is being produced, it's read and it's widely popularized. So we can say that New Historicism, it emphasizes the interrelationship between literature, history and culture or context, considering how literary works are shaped by, or how literary works are how they are shaped by and how they contribute to the political, social and cultural context in which they are produced. Okay, so that is the major attention, or that is the major emphasis of New Historicism. And now if you look at certain features or characteristics or principles of New Historicism, we can find that the most important thing in New Historicism, as the name suggests, would be the historical context. Okay, the historical context would be the primary concern, because New Historicism, it places a strong emphasis on understanding literary text within their special historical context. Because, for example, there are many other theories like formalism, new criticism, structuralism, post-structuralism, which actually denies any role or any role that the culture or the society has to play or the background of a particular work. So here, New Historicism, it places a strong emphasis on understanding literary text within their specific historical context. So it explores how this political, social, cultural factors influence and shapes the production of, not just production, but the production and reception of a literary text. So that is the primary concern of New Historicism. And apart from the historical context, we can say that New Historicism, it also gives importance to the concept of power and ideology, the two things that popularized along with Marxism and also with postmodernism, power and ideology. So similarly, we can find that New Historicism also shows its concern regarding power and ideology. And how does that happen? New Historicism, it analyzes the ways in which power structures and ideologies are reflected and negotiated in literary text. Okay, they analyzes the ways in which power structures and ideologies are reflected and negotiated in literary works, and it investigates how literature enforces and reinforces, and at the same time how literature does both the thing. It both reinforces and challenges the dominant ideologies and social hierarchy. So the historical context, power and ideology, and then we can say that intertextuality is another important concept that comes with New Historicism, or a principle that comes with New Historicism. Intertextuality and new discourse. Okay, intertextuality and discourse. So speaking about intertextuality and discourse, we can say that New Historicism, it recognizes that meaning is not permanent, but meaning is something that is constructed through intertextual references. Meaning is not permanent, but meaning is constructed through intertextual references, and the dialogue between, just like how Bakhtin says, the dialogue between various texts, cultural artifacts and discourses. How two texts have something in common, how two texts are related to each other. It explores how literary texts engage and how these literary texts are influenced by the other forms of cultural expression like rebellions, etc. Okay, then New Historicism, it also gives importance to the concept of marginalized voices. That is another one important feature that you can find in New Historicism, that is marginalized voices. That is, New Historicism, it's somewhat derived from postmodernism or post-structuralism that denies absolute truth, that denies grand narratives. That is why it is said everything is a literary text, historicity of text and textuality of history. So, New Historicism, it seeks to recover and give voice to the marginalized or suppressed perspectives within historical and literary narratives. So, here you can say that New Historicism, it examines the different ways in which literature represents and challenges the experiences and identities of this marginalized group. So, it gives voices to the unheard histories. As we always say, history is always narrated by the winner. So, New Historicism, it focuses on the voices of the marginalized people, of the unheard history. So, marginalized voices is another important feature when it comes to New Historicism. And the most important feature of New Historicism is that we regard history to be what, or we regard text as cultural artifacts. Okay, we regard text as cultural artifacts. So, New Historicism, it considers literary text as cultural artifacts that embodies and reflects beliefs, values and practices of a particular period. For example, if you take Hamlet or Othello or Macbeth as an example, it reflects or it considers literary text as a cultural artifact that embodies the beliefs, values and the practices of this particular, of the Elizabethan period. So, it explores the ways in which literature participates in a larger cultural and historical tapestry. Okay, so we can say that New Historicism, it treats text as a cultural artifact, and just like how the new voices or the voices of these marginalized people are heard, or the unheard histories are heard, we can say that another important feature of New Historicism is that they have this concept of reversion and subversion. That is, the giving importance to little narratives that is always skeptical towards the grand narratives. Even though that is a postmodern condition, New Historicism also derives that. New Historicism, it examines how literature can function as a site of resistance. Okay, how literature can function as a site of resistance and subversion, challenging the established power structures and offering an alternative perspective to this grand narrative, or proposing an alternative narrative to the existing history and culture. So, New Historicism, it rejects the idea of a fixed objective truth, but at the same time, it focuses on multiple or often conflicting interactions that happens within this thing. So, I just gave you an introduction to New Historicism because New Historicism sounds confusing when it is because it is interrelated to Marxism, it's interrelated to postmodernism or post-structuralism. So that's why I gave you a brief introduction to New Historicism. Now let's look at the questions that were asked from New Historicism. So in December 2018, there was this question from New Historicism: which of the following would not be invoked to describe a form of new historicist criticism? Which of the following would not be evoked to describe a form of new historicist criticism? The options are cultural materialism, archaeology of social constructs, post-structural recovery of authorial intent, genealogy of patriarchal discourse. Okay, let's look at the options. Question once again: which of the following would not be invoked to describe a form of new historicist criticism? Cultural materialism, archaeology of social constructs, post-structural recovery of authorial intent, genealogy of patriarchal discourse. So, I have mentioned about New Historicism. So, New Historicism, it is a critical approach developed in the 1980s in the writings of Stephen Greenblatt. So, New Historicism, it can be characterized by a parallel reading of the text with its socio-cultural and historical condition which form the context. So, New Historicism, it deals with the textuality of history and historicity of text. So, textuality of history gives the idea that history is constructed and history is fictionalized. That is the textuality of history. And historicity of text means text is inevitably embedded in the socio-political conditions of its productions, its interpretation, and its reception. Okay, so that is what New Historicism deals with. So, identifying the literary and non-literary texts available and accessible to the public at the time of its production. So, that is how intertextuality comes into New Historicism. So, if you have to study a text under New Historicism, you have to look at all the literary and non-literary texts that were available and accessible to the public during the time of its production. Reading and interpreting the text in the light of its core text. So, here the core text is the anecdote. Okay, so New Historicism has the features of post-structuralism as it rejects the essential idea of a common human nature that is shared by the author, characters and readers. And it believes that identity is plural and hybrid. Okay, so let's go back to the question. Which of the following would not be invoked to describe a form of new historicist criticism? So, first one is cultural materialism. It would be invoked. Then we have archaeology of social constructs. That's also something that comes under new historicism. Post-structural recovery of authorial intent. Post-structural recovery of authorial intent, it is not something that comes under new historicism. So, we have to say that new historic criticism or new historicism, which emerged in the late 20th century, it focuses on the intersection of literature and history. Okay, intersection of literature and history. It seeks to understand and analyze literary text in relation to the cultural, political, social context in which the texts were produced. Okay, so here we can say that cultural materialism, archaeology of social constructs and genealogy of patriarchal discourse are aligned with the key methodologies of new historicism, and they are given by Stephen Greenblatt in New Historicism, a cultural materialism. So, this if we speak about cultural materialism, we can say that this approaches, that is cultural materialism, it examines the material conditions and social relations that shape the cultural production, and this cultural production also includes literature. So, we can say that cultural materialism is invoked to describe a form of new historicist criticism. So, it emphasizes the connection between literature and the broader economic and social system. So, cultural materialism is a right answer. Then, archaeology of social constructs. When we speak about the archaeology of social construct, new historicism, it employs an archaeological method. Okay, new historicism, it employs an archaeological method to excavate and analyze the cultural, ideological and power structures that underlie social constructs and discourses. Okay, so archaeology of social constructs is also a method used in new historicism. Then genealogy of patriarchal discourse. So, genealogy of patriarchal discourse, you can say that new historicism, it engages in genealogical what can we say, investigations. It engages in genealogical investigations to trace and understand the historical development. So, in order to understand the historical development, new historicism, it engages in genealogical investigations. Okay, not just for the historical development, but also to look at the effects of patriarchal discourses and the and also of the power dynamics. So, genealogy of patriarchal discourse is something that new historicism engage itself. But when we speak about the post-structural recovery of authorial intent, it does not align with new historicism, because new historic criticism, it does not primarily focus on the recovery of authorial intent, because its central concern lies in examining what the historical and cultural context that shape the production and reception of literary works, rather than seeking to establish the author's original meaning or intention. Okay, so that is what so the correct answer is option C. The which of the following would not be invoked to describe a form of new historic criticism: post-structural recovery of authorial intent. So that comes as option C. So the correct answer is option C. So now let's look at the next question. Which writer applied the term cultural poetics to his own critical contribution to make literature and arts as part of social practice? Which writer applied the term cultural poetics to his own critical contribution to make literature and arts as part of social practice? So, the options are Stephen Greenblatt, Mikhail Bakhtin, Jonathan Dollimore and Raymond Williams. Stephen Greenblatt, Mikhail Bakhtin, Jonathan Dollimore and Raymond Williams. So you have to look at the writer who brought the concept of cultural poetics. So it's none other than Stephen Greenblatt. So Stephen Greenblatt, he was one of the founders of New Historicism, and he he put forward a set of critical practices that he refers to as cultural poetics, and this term is often used as a synonym for New Historicism. And cultural poetics, which is also known as New Historicism in America and cultural materialism in Britain, is form of a literary analysis where the purpose is to discover the original ideology behind significant historical and biological facts about writers, resources and the art they create. So, cultural poetics is basically an approach to literary and cultural analysis, same like New Historicism, which studies the interrelationship between literature, history and culture, or literature, society and culture. It explores how these cultural practices, beliefs and values are represented, how they are negotiated in literary text and artistic expression. So, cultural poetics, you can say that it examines the different ways in which literature and art are not influenced by social and political context in which they are also produced, but also contribute to shaping and reflecting those contexts. So the term cultural poetics, it was popularized by the literary scholar Stephen Greenblatt, who used this term, that is cultural poetics, to describe his approach within the field of New Historicism. So we can say that if New Historicism is a literary theory, cultural poetics is actually a set of critical practice. Okay, so cultural poetics, it seeks to understand how literary works engage with social and cultural systems, ideologies and power dynamics. So since it is a practice, what does this practice do? Cultural poetics, it explores the meanings, symbols and metaphors within literary text, and it analyzes how they participate in larger cultural discourses and practices. Okay, so as I said, New Historicism, if New Historicism is a theory, then cultural poetics is the method, just like the relationship between deconstruction and post-structuralism. So, if you speak about cultural poetics, it often considers the aspects of social and historical context. Okay, it takes the context of social and historical context, then we can find it gives importance to representation and signification, intertextuality and intersubjectivity, power and ideology, just like just like New Historicism. So let's go back to the question. Which writer applied the term cultural poetics to his own critical contribution to make literature and arts as part of social practice? So the correct answer is Stephen Greenblatt. We know about Stephen Greenblatt. He's an influential literary critic and a cultural critic. He coined the term cultural poetics, okay, to describe his approach it's an approach to describe his approach to literary analysis and interpretation, and he is known for his work in New Historicism. Okay, so the correct answer is option A, Stephen Greenblatt. Option A, Stephen Greenblatt. Stephen Greenblatt, he coined the term cultural poetics. Now let's look at the next question that was asked from New Historicism. In December 2020 and June 2021, cycles merged examination, there was a question regarding Stephen Greenblatt. Since New Historicism includes very limited number of writers, it's actually an easy approach when it comes to exam. Which two of the following are highlighted in relation to specific historical moments by Stephen Greenblatt? Which two of the following are highlighted in relation to specific historical moments by Stephen Greenblatt? Crisis of meaning, circulation of meaning, production of meaning and deferral of meaning. Crisis of meaning, circulation of meaning, production of meaning and deferral of meaning. Which two of the following are highlighted in relation to specific historical moments by Stephen Greenblatt? So before moving to the answer, Once again, let's look on Greenblatt and New Historicism. So, Greenblatt, he is one of the founders of New Historicism. He also coined the term cultural poetics, which was very influential since the early 1980s. And New Historicism, it's a form of literary theory that aims to understand the intellectual history through literature and literature through its cultural context, that is, historicity of a text and the textuality of history. So, looking back to the question, which two of the following are highlighted in relation to specific historical moments by Stephen Greenblatt? So, we can say crisis of meaning. That was not some that cannot be considered to be a primary answer, though it sounds right. Circulation of meaning. Circulation of meaning is one important thing that you can find in Stephen Greenblatt's. And then production of meaning. Production of meaning is also important because Stephen Greenblatt, he focuses on how meaning is produced. How meaning is produced within specific historical context. For example, the meaning that was produced during the Elizabethan age might not be the same meaning that was produced during the Enlightenment age or during the postmodern age. This actually differs. So, Greenblatt, he focuses on how meaning is produced within specific historical context. He examines how cultural practices in the sense literature and art contribute to the production of meaning. How this literature and art contribute to the production of meaning by representing and negotiating social and cultural values, ideologies and power dynamics. So we can say B and C are the correct answers. B and C comes as option B. So the correct answer is option B. So now moving to the next question. Again in December 2020, June 2021 cycles merged examination, there was this question regarding new historicism where two statements are given and you have to identify the correct statement. When it comes to statement question or assertion reason question regarding literary theory, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that even though the statements sound cunning or confusing, you have to understand what this theory actually denotes or what is the ideology behind that particular theory. Then you can answer the question. So then you have to equate whether the ideology that you know can be equated with the statement that they have given. So that is how you are supposed to answer the questions that are asked in the format of statements or assertion reason question from NTA NET examination. Anyway, let's look at these statements. Given below are two statements. Statement 1, new historicism stipulates that teleological connotations of history have to be eschewed. Statement 2, new historicism neither denies nor accepts totalizing explanations of historical events. So from the very statement, we can say that statement 2 is incorrect because new historicism, we can say that this would have been a correct statement if the statement was new historicism denies the totalizing explanations of historical events. But here it said that new historicism neither denies nor accepts. No, it denies. So, statement 2 is incorrect, but statement 1 is correct. So, we know about new historicism. It's a critical approach developed in the 1980s in the writings of Stephen Greenblatt. It is characterized by a parallel reading of the text within its socio-cultural historical conditions, which forms the context. So, new historicism, it deals with the textuality of history. Textuality of history means history is fictionalized, history can be constructed, and historicity of text, which shows that text is inevitably embedded in the socio-political conditions of the productions and the interpretation, and the reading and interpreting the text in the light of its context, where context is the analogue. So we can say that the text and the context, okay, the text and the context are perceived as expressions of the same historical movement. Okay, if a French Revolution created a literary text, it is the same French Revolution that created the context, or the context can be, or this literature created the context. So, the text and the context, they are perceived as expressions of the same historical movement. So, new historicism, we can say that new historicism it derives from post structuralism, because both rejects the essential idea that human nature is shared by the author. It both denies the authority of the author or the fundamental concept of truth or the absolute truth. It believes in plurality. That is how new historicism agrees with post structuralism. It believes in the plurality of meaning. It believes in the multiplicity of meaning. So we can say that statement 1, new historicism stipulates that teleological connotations of history have to be eschewed. It's a right statement. Statement 2, new historicism neither denies nor accepts totalizing explanations of historical events. That's a wrong statement. So statement 1 is correct and statement 2 is, statement 1 is true, but statement 2 is false. That comes as option D. So the correct answer is option D. And in the latest exam, that is in December 2020, there was this question: to which of the following theories new historicism is indebted? To which of the following theories new historicism is indebted? And they have given different options. We have Marxism, formalism, reader response theory, existentialism, and hermeneutics. Okay, to which of the following theories new historicism is indebted? Marxism, formalism, reader response theory, existentialism, and hermeneutics. I think I don't have to speak further about new historicism. You have got an idea about it. New historicism, the form of literary theory that aims to understand intellectual history through literature and literature through its cultural context. It follows the 1950s field of history of ideas and refers to itself as a form of cultural poetics. It first developed in the 1980s primarily through the work of the critic Stephen Greenblatt and gained widespread influence in the 1990s. In its historicism and in its political interpretations, new historicism is indebted to Marxism. Okay, but there is also a difference between Marxism and new historicism. Marxism tends to see literature as an example of superstructure. Okay, according to Marxism, society can be divided into two: base and superstructure, which reciprocates the relationship with each other. So the base is the material relations of production, while superstructure it includes the institutions that gives credibility to the so-called capitalism, or so-called what can we say, the material relations of production. So here Marxism regards literature as a part of superstructure, but new historist thinkers tend to take a more nuanced point of view, seeking it not exclusively as class related but extending throughout society. And this view primarily derives from Foucault. So though new historicism and reader response theory differs, they share a belief in referentiality, a belief that literature refers to and is referred to by things outside itself. So when we say to which of the following theories new historicism is indebted, we can say that Marxism, formalism, reader response theory, existentialism, and hermeneutics. The correct answer is Marxism and reader response, that is A and C. So new historicism, it is indebted to Marxism. So Marxism, it considers literature as a superstructure, but though there is a development, you can say that Marxism and reader response theory paved way to new historicism. So A and C comes as option A. The correct answer is option A. So these were the questions that were asked from new historicism from December 2018 to December 2020. So we discussed almost 5 to 6 questions that were asked from new historicism. So I have given an introduction to new historicism. Then we discussed about the different writers, especially Stephen Greenblatt, his concept, his ideology, and the different methods and ideas believed or principles shared in new historicism. So in conclusion, we can say that new historicism, it offers a very valuable approach to literary and cultural analysis by emphasizing the interplay between literature, history, and culture, or literature, history, and the context. So though new historicism focus on the historical context, the power dynamics, the intertextuality, the gives important the marginalized voices. It encourages us to see literary text as a complex cultural artifacts. Okay, it encourages us to see a literary text as a complex cultural artifacts that both shape and at the same time reflects the social and political landscape of the time. When we say the time, it means the time of the production and also the time of the reception. So by examining the ways in which literature participates and challenges the dominant ideologies, new historicism, it actually opens up avenues for understanding the complexities of human experience. Okay, and it also invites us to critically engage within the narratives and discourses that shape our understanding of this world. So that is the approach of new historicism. So this approach reminds us that literature is not something that is detached from the society, just like how formalism or new criticism suggests. It is not something that is detached from history or society, but it is something that is intimately intertwined in it. Okay, new historicism, it makes us remind that literature is not something that is detached from society or detached from culture and history, just like how the other theories suggest, but it is something that is intimately intertwined with it, which actually provides us with various insights into the dynamics of power, the construction of meaning, the possibilities of for reversion and subversion of the absolute truths or the grand narrative. So by adopting the new historicism or the practice of new historicism, we bring a connection between literature and society. So that is all about new historicism. So that's all in this video. Thank you.